everybody, and welcome to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World. I'm Stelios Hatzakis, CEO of One Business World. Leading Entrepreneurs of the World features entrepreneurs, founders, and business leaders, presenting on cutting-edge topics and the latest industry developments. Today, we're very pleased to welcome entrepreneur, speaker, and author, Ben Hart. Ben is a serial entrepreneur and strategist with a passion for building things from the ground up. Ben was the co-founder and CEO of Qinetic, a fitness streaming platform which launched in 2012 until its merger in 2018. During that time, Ben and his team expanded the company's presence in over 30 countries globally and formed strategic content partnerships with Yahoo, Health Magazine, Self Magazine, ABC News, Well and Good, among others. Ben is also a speaker who has spoken at a number of universities in New York, NYU, Manhattan College, and he has also been hosted by the federal government of Mexico to empower and inspire young entrepreneurs in Mexico. Ben has also hosted a podcast show called Off the Grid, where he sat down with influencers, athletes, entrepreneurs, and professionals to discuss the reality of the tough, gritty process of becoming success in your field. Today, Ben is going to speak about a topic he feels very strongly about, and that has been the inspiration for his latest book, The Zero Mindset, Breaking the Social Rules You've Been Taught in order to build your vision in business from zero. The Zero Mindset was created for those that are starting or thinking of starting a new idea, chapter, or business in their life from the ground floor, from zero. The book delivers great detail on building a mindset and the strategy that will best prepare someone to start something new and fresh from zero. Ben, it's great to have you here with us today to hear more about the Zero Mindset. Welcome to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World.
Well, I got to say, amazing. Thank you for that introduction. You took the words out of my mouth, so it doesn't give me much room here to make a good introduction, I see. But either way, I thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate you giving me this platform and opportunity to speak on a concept that I've been working on for a little while, the Zero Mindset, which I'll get into, but I really do want to get into what got me ambitious and what got me really craving in that realm. So just like you said, I'm touching this very, very briefly because I don't want this to be the big part of the conversation here. I've been an entrepreneur since 23. I started off as a trainer in New York, kind of morphed into starting a streaming platform with two amazing co-founders. And we built that business for going on six, 7 years, merged in 2018 with a great company, Studio Media. And after that, I really want to say this is very important. After that, I started a show called Off the Grid. And this is what started the inspiration for this Zero Mindset, technically. So I started Off the Grid, and I would sit down with a number of professionals, and it wasn't in any specific field. It was across the board because I did want to really help give the youth a better understanding to what goes into the process when they see anything that comes across as successful on the gram or on social media and so on and so on. And I wanted to give perspective on what that really entailed, what that process was like. So again, I sat down with entrepreneurs, teachers, creators, media execs, models, and we all touched on what that process was like. And it was really shocking of what type of ruggedness and grit most of these people had to go through. And I wanted to really hit that story that's non-highlightable, the non-highlighted story in their life, and highlight that part because I feel like that was the most important. So along that way, and then following that, I started speaking at more colleges and institutions, and as you mentioned, for the federal government of Mexico. And I started speaking to young, inspired minds about entrepreneurship. And the main topic I always spoke of was starting from zero. That was really the concept that I wanted to bring forth. Probably because my personal experience in that within entrepreneurship at a very young age, in the trajectory of things, and in that moment, we all have our own gritty process. And in that moment, I spent 5-6 years in New York without a lease, these things are made up the realm that I bring in today here to speak about, because that really put me in the mindset of what was most important to get through these places and times, and how to actually finagle my way to start something with nothing. So I started to speak to a lot of kids at colleges, and a lot of the conversations tended to be around, well, I don't have, any. Oh, here, let me run it back for real quick. I actually started to speak on business strategy from zero. So I would talk about things that you would do to execute on building a business. And then from feedback and from conversations along the way, from conversations on my platforms, I started to realize that it was a little bit less about the business strategy aspect. It was more about this thing I call mindset strategy. Now, a lot of kids were struggling with, sure, they had, common themes are, they don't have any money, they have zero money, zero team, zero connections, zero resources, zero opportunities given. And while that was true, that was also coupled with the fear of failure, things being too risky, we're in bad times, all these variables that I would just constantly question, well, like, who taught you those things? Who taught you things were that it's too risky, or who taught you how to fear certain things and what failure was, and where did you grab these things? And more than likely, it was from the previous generations, the generations that raised them. And obviously, there's a set of conditions that the previous generations had to go through that our current generation doesn't have to face. My point being, I will get into that in a second, but that kind of led me to the zero mindset idea. And this zero mindset really came about from a set of deprogramming principles that kind of tried to like bring it back down. First, yes, obviously we all go through a place where we have zero this, regardless of the zero finances, zero connections, zero opportunities, and all those factors. Yes, that's true. But along with that, there was the teachings that have been taught or viewed or doctrinated into the minds had to be questioned and had to be ripped down. So the theory is, we really want to bring it back down to zero and start there, so that you can build more effectively, not based off of bad biases and bad principles or ideas that might have worked decades ago, but principles that work better now. So a lot of the deprogramming comes with questioning a lot of things you were taught about these things that they were mentioning to me: too risky, failure, the amount of influence you have in your life. So that's kind of where we started to get into the zero mindset. So I wanted to create a book around the zero mindset, and the idea of it is that it's a two-pronged approach. One prong is that we cover a mindset shift, and that mindset shift is somewhat of a deprogramming, but there are a set of principles that just so happen to rip down some of the things or question some of the things that the kids of my generation and the next generations and Gen Z were taught. And then part two of the book actually goes down to business strategy. The thing that I wanted to start with in the past originally, that I realized very quickly was not the main ingredient. And the main ingredient was kids just figuring out what it is they wanted to do, why they're fearing what they're fearing, what's holding them back from doing things, why they deem things too risky. And I wanted to help put those things in perspective. So again, that led me to this point where I wanted to create a solution for, regardless of what transition you're going on in your life, whether you're a college grad, just getting out of school, just wanting to start something fresh and new, you have ideas, but concepts you were taught or hold you back. Whether you're an entrepreneur who has ideas, you don't really know how to get started, you don't know who to talk to because you don't really have anything, at least in your mind, or you're going through a career change and you don't know how to escape the career change. You don't actually know how to make that leap or make that jump to the next thing, for a variety of different reasons, from social norms that have been taught to you from your parents, from teachers, from mentors, from your aunts, your uncles, and so on. So I want to start by saying, one, this did stem from a place where there was a generational pass down of information and ideas, also fears that came from baby boomers and Generation X to the following generation, and rightfully so. It's just as ridiculous as saying to them, in 1960, you want to build your brand. There is no brand to build. They have to worry about putting food on the table. What brand are you talking about? And that didn't exist for obvious reasons. We were not living in a global connectedness era. We were not communicating with people from across the world to solve problems that we cared so deeply about. None of these things were really existing at that moment, especially for global masses. Never mind young youth. They were always taught to go out, get a job, secure your family, save, buy a house. These were the things that were reinforced. Today, sorry about that. Today, these things don't exist in that framework anymore. We have a global opportunity to stay connected and be connected and to build things together that we've never had before. So that started to shift this idea on what I'm calling about the zero mindset, is we might have to debunk some of those things to move forward. So I think it's very important to put that framework in perspective. So one, currently we live in the greatest time of human history. And progress may be one of the biggest facts of our human history. And if you map anything from a progressive state, if you map anything going back from decades and centuries ago, we've been progressing in most of the areas as a globe, in the global areas that matter most to well-being and opportunity. And I could go into all those. There's Steven Pinker. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He wrote a book, The Enlightenment, that speaks so deeply on this. And I use some of this in the book. I don't know if I should go so far into them right now, but the point being is we live in the best era for opportunity. We live in this, and I understand, again, like, I want to also bring this back because I don't want to get ahead of myself with this. I understand the trials and tribulations and the issues that people might be facing, especially during the global pandemic, things that have been going on. But given that state, given how great of an opportunistic moment we live in, that can't be the reason that you have the state of mind you have, or the things that might be holding you back. Imagine what your ancestors and what the people that have sacrificed so much to get to the point that you're at right now. Imagine the things that they had to go through, the trials and tribulations they had to go through to get to the place that you're at today. So I want to be able to just put that in perspective, because that really matters in a way where, if you believe that we are living in a regressive state, in a global regressive state, then you might develop a more fatalistic mindset, a more fatalistic approach to what opportunities you have at this moment. And that is based off of things that are not true as a whole, as a collective. Now, obviously, progress is not the same, and it's not the same for everybody, and everything doesn't progress at the same time. But as a collective, that has been to the point where right now we've gotten to a point of progress where we're picky about the amount of milk in a Frappuccino for Starbucks. Yes, and that can blow your mind. But if you think that this is what your great grandparents were thinking about and what they were worried about, I'd question that. So the reason I wanted to say that, I really wanted to start with that, because I do want to say that platform and the opportunities that you have right now are not lesser than your grandparents and your great grandparents and the past generations. You now live in the most opportunistic time. And we can all thank the internet for that. The next phase, because I do kind of tell a story with this. I do kind of go down here, and this is an opt-in program to some extent, because that's just the way I design things. The next phase, which is a really important one, is your personal story. So obviously, we get our personal stories from our youth, from our childhood, from how we grow up, from who tells things about us, from how we perceive ourselves. And you couldn't do the math on it. There's just too many variables. But the story that you have about yourself and the story that you've been told about yourself, couple that, reflects so strongly in what you believe is possible for yourself, or what you believe you can build. And And part of this book is not just a realistic standpoint, it's also from an optimistic standpoint. It's from putting your existence into perspective so that you can clear the plate, so that you can understand the truth behind it all. So that's one part. And the other part of that, of this personal story is, you have to identify your zero and take accountability for the zero. So it's very important to be honest with what you lack and where you stand. And it's even more important to hold accountability for those things. So if we can't get past this point of, of just from a clean slate of starting from zero, if you can't get past the point of holding personal accountability for the position you're currently in, as well as what you build and the effects of what you build, or what you do and the effects of what you do, we can't continue this conversation of deprogramming or this conversation of developing a better mindset, because it really starts with personal accountability. Because the minute you start creating stories on why things are not in your favor, because the reality is that the world that we live in doesn't owe you an explanation. And while we all have our subjective experiences, we all have our things that we've been through that shaped us, that molded us into the place we're in. And obviously some of us have shortcomings. When we start mapping things and not taking accountability for where we're at in our life, this is where we get on a downward spiral, and we can't actually, there's nothing to be formed because you won't take accountability for things. So the point of this part is we must take accountability for our actions in the past and our actions in the future, regardless of what it is that you're doing. If you don't have the mindset to saying, oh, hey, like, yes, I did that. Yes, that was me. I'm so sorry. I need to move and adjust to that, as opposed to saying, you did it, she did it. Oh, this is the reason why I just, I can't get that done because that place never let me in the first place. All these scenarios that create excuses for you not to do the thing that you want to do or that you need to do. All right. So now we're past the personal story part. This is the intro part of the book that I feel like is very important, not just from an identity perspective, but from a personal accountability perspective. That is first and foremost. So then we go right into strategy. Okay. My strategy, I have a two-pronged approach. My strategy is, one, there's mindset strategy, and the second is business strategy. Now, when I was a first-time entrepreneur, I didn't really think about mindset strategy. It wasn't a thing. It was only until I started having some really deep and impactful conversations with this generation's, Gen Z, even millennials, about how they feel about certain things. It only wasn't until I started having these conversations about what was holding them back. And it wasn't business strategy. It wasn't something you could just lay a template on their hand and be like, oh, there you go. It wasn't as simple as that. And that was the first mistake I made. It was deeper than that, because there were some real traumas that they had to address. There were some real things that they had to look inside of what they've been taught, question, and because those are the things that were holding them back. And that's what I'm calling mindset strategy. So I think of mindset strategy as the first primary, most important aspect of it, from starting something from zero. And then there's business strategy, which is the second most important, but just as vital, because that's the actual strategy. That's where you actually get in the weeds. That's where you start to do it. That's where you start to execute. Set up, execute. Mindset strategy, direction. Business strategy, speed. That's the kind of the equation I make in the book. So the mindset strategy is to set up, there's this common saying that you can run as far as you want west, looking for the sunrise, and you'll never catch it. And that stuck with me when I started to create this, because that variable is just so important. If hard work doesn't mean anything unless you're working in the direction that it makes most sense. And I saw mindset strategy as a direction setter, as a figuring it out, as a tearing down and understanding for what it really is, so that you can move forward with the business strategy more effectively. So we start off with strategy. So I'm distinguishing mindset strategy from business strategy. Very different uses. One comes before the other, in my humble opinion. And that's that. So mindset strategy, the way I broke down mindset strategy in here is I kind of defined it here as a set of principles that you can stand on, refer to, and make decisions on when starting from zero. And I think that these are important place to set a base for yourself, a strong enough base where you feel comfortable making decisions about the execution of your business or your vision. And I use vision a lot is because I don't want to pinpoint it to a specific business or startup. This could just be a general vision. This could be a nonprofit. This could be a mission that you have that you really want to do. This could be, a passion project. It doesn't really necessarily matter what it is. That's why I want to say it's a vision, because all of it applies, generally speaking. So the goal of mindset strategy is to bring perspective, direction, and truth to the current reality that you're living in, an opportunity, because you want to be able to use those zeros in your life as power sources. And once you figured out what that power is in you and a true understanding of these things that are holding you back, that don't really need to be holding you back, the zeros are the powerful things that actually hold true in your life, that you can actually use to go forward and progress this. So I created 12 principles, 12 principles of the zero mindset and the mindset strategy side of it. I'm only going to touch on 5 for 2 reasons. One, I don't want to waste everybody's time in going into every single one. That's not the most important reason. The second most important reason is because I don't want to give away the whole book, because I had the most fun diving into the mindset strategy part, much more over the business strategy, because I feel like I've spent too much time in the business strategy part over the past decade and so in my life. So I'm more passionate about psychology and more passionate about the mindset strategy part than anything else. So I will touch on 5. And I do think I picked the most important 5 because these 5 I feel like are ones that really set the tone of what the book's about, and I think that they rip down some of the structure that might have been a part of the fabric that you've been taught. So 1 second. So yeah. So the first one, I want to talk about the power of the uninfluenced mind. Obviously, like every single day, I just have some stats here that are in the book that I'm just reading to you. But every single day, 300 billion emails are sent, 500 million tweets are sent, 4 petabytes of data are created on Facebook. That really means 350 million photos, 100 million hours of video watch time, 95 million photos and videos are shared on Instagram, 65 billion messages sent via WhatsApp, and over 5 billion searches from Google, 3.5 from Google. Those stats are every day. So obviously, this is not a condition that previous generations have experienced. This oversaturation of information is bombarding you every day. Now, I dive into here the power of being uninfluenced. Now, obviously, we live in a world where it's easy to be influenced by information, by opinions, by things, by somebody's analogy of how they said one other thing. And, what you notice, I want to take a little bit from Peter Thiel here, because what you notice is that some of the most successful founders in history and even today have developed a slight form of Asperger's, because they have this social awkwardness to them, and that stems from a place of them not really taking social cues very well. And they some of them are so successful in that most people don't know what they're talking about when it comes to something innovative and new, because most people live in a day-to-day where they don't have to think about innovation. They don't have to do anything new, and technically they don't really care to, because they are tied up in their day and providing for themselves, and that's totally understood. But when you get too much input from a place that doesn't understand it, it leads to a very clouded space on how you can look at the world. Now, I don't know if this is a thing that they've developed over time or if this is just naturally them on how they're born. And the reason I know anything about Asperger's or anything about that is my brother has it. So my brother has Asperger's. I would say it's a little bit on the mild side, depending how you want to look at it, but There's a, yes, it is obvious, but there is also this power that comes along with it of neglecting social cues or opinions from other people. And it's not because you're trying hard to reject opinions, because you're not picking up on how important the opinions are. So you're not really taking the opinions on what you're doing seriously enough to consider it. And there is a power on that, on being uninfluenced, that it creates a space of originality, and it creates visionaries, because that ability to not, this is not to say you don't take opinions, but there's an ability to, in a world full of saturation, for your mind to be unsaturated and original and stem from originality, is a power that is just neglected to talk about. And I give an example of this, because you guys know Elon Musk. There is there's a way of thinking that Elon has built. He hasn't built it just for himself. There's a way of thinking that he has, and basically, let me give you an example. So for most media back in the day, when we were talking about electric cars, most people actually, and the media induced it onto the people, they thought that building electric cars would be way too expensive. It'll never happen. It's just not the world we live in. The batteries would be the real critics always convinced that the batteries would be too much to make. The materials were too much. But if you were to think from a first principles mindset, which is what I talk about a little bit about in the book as well, it's not necessarily reasoning from analogy, like what you've always heard. Reasoning from analogy means that what you've always heard will be true going forward because it's what it's always been. That's part of the meaning, but it reasons from the bottom truth. So, let me give an example. They would always say that. They would always say, all right, well, it's going to take way too much to build the battery packs. It'll never be sustainable. It will never work because mass people don't like it. They're not sexy enough. The list just kept continuing. But Elon was thinking from a different framework. And what that means is that he was obviously uninfluenced by that. And he would say, all right, well, let's break down the constituents of the battery and the materials that make up the battery. All right, that's nickel, carbon, aluminum, break down each material costs and buy them ourselves and see if we can mold them into the shape of a battery. Obviously that worked. Nobody ever thought it would work, because if he would have listened to the average consensus, what has always worked in the past, and other people's opinions on how they reason in their life, obviously that wouldn't have happened. He wouldn't have figured out that he can make it affordable. He can produce it himself, and he can put it into a sexier looking car that performs high. So there's, I don't want to go too far into this realm of being uninfluenced, but that was part one that I go to in the book. And again, there's 12. I'm going to say 5. That was part one of the first one. Is the power of being uninfluenced, and I kind of diagnose on steps to take on how you can be less influenced by society, by teachers, by friends, by social media, by the number of things that are splatting at your brain every day. Yes. Number 2 is risk. So I go into this pretty deeply in the book, and because I feel very passionately about it. So I'm always really fascinated about how we see risk in our life. And I understand, especially as a millennial and Gen Z, I understand how we can see certain things as risky, not just from generational pass down of those concepts of what is risky and what's not, but in just quick stat, like in the year 2000 we had 300 billion of student loan debt. In 2020 we have 1.7 trillion of student loan debt, and I believe the average amount on an even loan, I think, is 32,000, and it takes an average of 20 years to pay those loans back for most people. I understand, I come from a place of empathy with that, because I myself too still have student loan debt. Obviously it's the worst type of debt, and you can't get out of it. But a whole realm of issues come along with that I don't really want to get into. But there is obviously risk associated with that previous generations did not have to go through to the extent that we have today. However, risk in the way we see it today needs to be put into perspective. It needs to be put in perspective because it goes anywhere from degrees of illness to death to not enough cream in your cappuccino. There's so much level of it. Or just, my point is, we go from anywhere from death to now in such a thriving country, we go to being uncomfortable is considered risk. Risk has gotten to a place where it's a level of comfort, and we need to put that into perspective. How lucky of times we live in, how great of, how many opportunities are we allotted in this place to be deemed that our greatest risk is, to go a couple hours without eating. Like, it's just, it's so crazy, because if you really take in perspective, you have to start asking yourself the question is, what is risk to you? Not just because what you heard in the media, not because what your teacher told you, and absolutely not because of what your parents told you. What is risk? What is risk to you? Are the risks real risks to the general population? That's something you need to ask yourself. You need to put your risks in perspective. Now, my risks are not the same as a Wall Street executive's risks. They're just not. And I have to acknowledge that, right? And what we consider risks. But from your perspective, you have to understand that most of the world, 85% of the world still makes less than $30 a day. We have to understand that 9 million people a year are going to die from hunger every year globally. Now, one would say that is risk. Living at the place, I'm pretty sure that globally we'll agree that that's risk, and how they deem their life. If it's outside of surviving, that could be a risk. So if you're on the verge of death because of hunger, you would say that you're living in a pretty risky lifestyle, doing anything other than survival. Most people here are complaining about, like, I obviously use the Frappuccino example. That's kind of ridiculous, but the level of comfort they associate with how risky it is. But your risks are not real risks to the global population. And I think that if you're watching this, at least, I would imagine that your risks are not even close to that. And you have to, if there's anything you just get out of this risk thing, that we must acknowledge that, that these risks are on a spectrum, and the spectrum of risks, some risks are very real for folks. Your risks in building a business, starting a vision, are not real risks. These type of risks are only, like, these type of risks are risks that others in other countries would die to have, these risks that you deem to be risks. There are people in countries right now who would die to have the opportunity to say, oh, I have an idea, I can build the idea just by pure grit and wittiness and connection, and I have the ability and the freedom and the connected to go out and make that idea, bring that idea into fruition. The idea that's a risk to most people blows my mind sometimes. So I think that when we talk about risk, you need to put it in perspective on what is risk, and why is it risk to you? Is it risk because of your community, it's considered a risk? The people who you surround yourself with, it's considered a risk? Is it risk because the media told you shouldn't, that save your money, don't spend it, and then that's the risk? Like, just understand why it's the risk. And I'm not saying what should be a risk to you or shouldn't be a risk to you, but what's worth acknowledging is that you must acknowledge the truths, and the truths lie in us as a whole, what risks are, and then compare your risks to somebody else who actually has real risks. And then you do the math on your own life. I'm not necessarily here for that. I'm just here for you to understand and question the actual things you consider risks, because that is a common excuse that I get constantly about why somebody can't do something, because of the risks of failure, risk of losing their money, risk of losing their house, risk of losing their loved one, whatever the risk may be. But these are things that need to be questioned and diagnosed for your own particular situation. It's not a universal answer. Number 3, failure. So I want to get into this because the real question is, what is the failure stemming from? And I talk to many people on, I have a fear of failure because I'm afraid of what my parents are going to think of me. I'm afraid of the category my friends are going to put me in as a result of my failure. And I understand that. But oftentimes we fear this thing called failure because it puts a dent in our social status. And this is kind of what I go back to with those who have this mild form of Asperger's, who kind of disregard public opinion, is that they have less of that fear. It's not that they just disregard the fear more. They care a little bit less about what people think. Again, whether that fear stems from how people look at us from social media, to family, to mentors, to friends. When we talk about failure, we have to understand it in the context we're speaking. Failure is only failure. Like micro failures don't matter because most of the time they're arbitrage anyway, whether it's certain goals you made. But the macro failure is just not doing anymore, right? It's not necessarily it's a failure. And if we look at the failures, whatever failing means, how are you measuring it? Because you have to understand, is it a goal that you created? Is it something that is in some game? Because to Simon Sinek, he always has this one point, the infinite game, and he wrote a whole book on it. But business and your ideas and yourself, these are not a game, and there's not any agreed upon metric that we all agreed upon that if this guy hits this, he's lost. And if so, what metric is it? This is not basketball. There's not a start and there's not an end. This is who can last the longest. This is continuing doing what you love. That is really what we're talking about. So when you talk about failure to whom and to what metric? What did we even agree on? There's no universally agreed upon failure condition. Yes, if we're talking about specifically for a startup, yes, you can say that going out of business, sure, was a failure at that point, but it might have been a micro failure in the realm of what you're really looking at here. You just need to put this in a perspective, and I obviously I dive much more into the book. That was number 3. Number 4, talk about the power of resourcefulness. We talk about accomplishing certain tasks. There's, everybody talks about climbing the mountain to reach those, to get the tool, but the real tools are on the way up the mountain. Resourcefulness is the 4th principle I talk about, which is, to me, the probably the most important when we're talking about stemming from zero. The ability to be resourceful. When you say, I don't have X, Y, or Z, I have 0 connections, I have 0 resources, I have 0 finances, I have I have 0 anything, 0 opportunities. That's what you're saying is that you have 0 resourcefulness, because it's not about you having them, it's about, can you get them? And that's really what resourcefulness is. The ability to be resourceful, the ability to go out and get those things, the ability not to say you don't have them, but to figure out how to get them. And it's not about even getting them, it's about what you do to get them. It makes the resourcefulness even worth the conversation. That's 4. I'm going to go over my last one real quick, just on the mindset side. And entrepreneurship. I know it's a general topic, but I definitely go very deep into understanding the true nature of entrepreneurship. I think entrepreneurship has gotten blown up to, cars, boats, the quote unquote success lifestyle and what that means. But there's a true gritty nature on it that doesn't match any of the things you might see in the highlight reel, that is just constantly an uphill battle full of putting out fires. And I think that needs to be highlighted and it needs to be discussed. And I think the meaning of true entrepreneurship has gotten lost in the attraction of outcome. Entrepreneurship is about coming together and thinking about how to solve a problem or how to make something better. And I hear, again, there's been too many people that I've talked to that say, I want to start a company, and I say, oh, great, what company, what kind of company do you want to start? Well, I don't know, I just want to start one. And I think that's the bad way to look at entrepreneurship. That's the bad way, because it's gotten sexy. You just want to start a company. That is where the flaw happens. That is where you have nothing really on it to start. You're just starting, and that's where you haven't got enough in the tank to pursue that to the fullest. You just want to do it because it seems like a really great lifestyle. And I can guarantee if you talk to any actual entrepreneur, they will tell you it is not. They would tell you you will go through many lonely, achy, gritty nights trying to figure out why you took this decision in the first place, unless you figure out what it is you really love and go after the things that you're most passionate about, or the problems that are the most important to you. Again, it's not just about passion points, and I want to say that very clearly. I don't think the world is all flowers and it's just about who can who can pursue the most passions in their life. But some people find so much some people find so many unique problems in the world that they find this deep, meaningful way to go after and try to solve them. So, I do really go deep into the true nature of entrepreneurship from speaking to a number of entrepreneurs as well as myself. And I'm going through it one more time again this year with my other co-founder, Mick. So now I transition from mindset strategy, which I have the 12 principles that, as a result, some of those principles kind of pull down and dissect some of the things that we've been taught as a younger generation. And I go into business strategy, which is something that I spent a number of years on. To me, this is the exciting point, not necessarily in the writing perspective, but from a doing perspective, from the execution perspective of it. The business strategy is essentially the execution of your ideas. And it doesn't necessarily have to map to a business. It could just be, this is my vision, this is my idea, this is what I'd like to do. This is the area I'd want to really focus on. So for me, I map out 4 ingredients to your vision. 1, team. 2, technology. 3, business strategy. And 4, communication. So let's start with 1. The first one is team. So really, it comes down to, when you want to execute a business strategy, these are the 4 main components of your business or your vision that you need to take very seriously, that other people will also take very seriously of you. So team, who's on your team? Are they complementary? Do they have complementary skills to you? What value do they bring to the team? What are you guys doing collectively to work on getting new team members? The team part is obviously a larger factor than the actual strategy itself, because it really comes down to adapting to different strategies. You might have a different business strategy that you need to implement, and the team is really going to be the ones that decide, all right, this is what we're going to have to do. I'm going to have to get somebody else. I'm going to have to get a creative in now, or I'm going to have to get a coder. If you're starting a technology company, and when we refer to technology today, we're really referring to something on the internet. So if we're referring to that, obviously, if you're building a technology company, you want to start with, you want to have somebody on your team that's good with technology, a CTO, somebody who can own that part of the business, especially early. You want to keep it very tight, nimble, specific specialties and skills that will advance the cause. 2, technology. And what I mean by technology in this sense is, what is unique about your offering? What are you bringing to the table that's new, that might be proprietary? What's advancing this? How can this do more with less? Because that's really what technology is supposed to do. Technology and the offering of it is supposed to say, what are we doing more with less? Technology has enabled that, and it will continue to enable that much more as we go along in the future. The third one is business strategy. And what I mean by that is, what is your actual strategy? Do you have any partnerships? What's your marketing look like? What is your phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 of this vision? What is the strategy that you're trying to implement that will showcase to your team, that will get people excited to want to do something with you, to want to continue to build this mission that you have? So that's one. And then the fourth one is communication. And I think this gets kind of underlooked in most cases. The communication of your ideas, your team, technology, and vision is much overlooked. You can be a really good communicator and lack in some ways in those areas, still be able to progress because you were able to get people in your team, convince people, sell people on certain things. I talk about this as the selling part of it. And I think selling has gotten used in such a bad negative connotation because of the Wall Street thing that has happened and how we see Wall Street guys and brokers just selling. That's not the way it's used. Selling is basically adding something of value that somebody else needs. And if you can communicate these and package these up in a simple way, if you package those into the other three I mentioned, communication with team, technology, and business strategy, you have a full compartmentalized approach into understanding how you get your vision going. Those are the four big categories. I know we're kind of running out of time, but I do want to hit this point. There's a vision outline, and it's important for you to outline your vision specifically. And you can get specific with a deck. Now you start with a deck, right? You can probably just Google this, but there's a deck where you basically go into, first, mission, vision. What do you stand for? What's the vision of this? This is how you get the right people a part of your vision, of what you're trying to build. Two, what's the problem? What's the problem you're really trying to solve? If the problem is unique enough and important enough to other people, they'll want to be a part of it. The opportunity. What is the opportunity? What does this look like? What's the market on this? Or other, if I'm going after the education space, how many kids are in school? How many kids are in high school? How many kids are in college? I need to know these things. Obviously, that's the opportunity. Solution, which is you. What's the solution you're bringing to the table? 5, product detail and technology. What is the details and technology about your product, just so we spoke about earlier, that makes it unique? 6, marketing partnerships. How are you going to get this out there? Do you have any partnerships lined up? You're basically within all these. I'll cover this after. 7, business strategy in phases. What's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4? What is the bigger vision of this? What's the real business strategy behind this? Competition is obviously an important outline. Business model, how are you making money? 10 is team. Who's on the team? And outline, just like I said before this. And then company valuation and ask. So those are the kind of 11 slides. You can go back and forth. And different people prefer them different ways. These are the 11 I like. But really what you're trying to do with all these is you're trying to leave no questions, really. You're trying to draw a story down the line to where when you get to the end, somebody really's got to think on, all right, let me nail this question down because I did not understand how this was going to work. You really want to kind of eliminate a lot of the questions associated. So you want to cover your business. And this isn't just for investors. This is for you. This is for your team. This is outlining. This is for you to get an objective look and a bird's eye view over your vision. So you understand, what am I missing? What are we missing? What do we got to work on? Where are we weak? Let's acknowledge these things. And then that's in terms of outline, you have your deck. And another one, which is just as important, is a one-pager. Is the same information, but you boil everything that you have into this deck, extremely simplified, and you add it to a one-pager. Now, this one-pager is to capture the attention. Obviously, not to give all the detail. It's to capture the attention to whom you are trying to present this to. Now, I don't care if you're trying to present it to a team member, to a designer, to a technology guy, to an investor, a potential funder, a potential other partner that wants to get on this vision with you. Essentially, all these things are used to, 1, to understand the business, and 2, to sell, to get more people to want to be a part of what you care about, because they care about it just as much. This is your vision. And lastly, at the end of the book, I basically say permission slip, and I go over this, and there's a whole detailed chapter on permission slip. There's a lot of people who feel that they they need to get the approval from people before going and doing stuff, and there's a lot of that, like, well, so-and-so didn't approve of this, or I don't know if they like that, or, you don't need the approval. You just don't need the approval. And if you needed the permission slip, like if this wasn't it, I don't know what is. This is the permission slip. So you should just be able to understand yourself a little bit better via the mindset strategy, via the understanding what things you've been taught that you don't need to be regarding anymore because we live in different times. And then the business strategy. You don't need permission from anybody to do this. You don't need anybody's approval or anybody's praise to do this. This is now you need to own the opportunity at hand, whatever the vision might be. And you need to take full accountability and go do it. So if you need a permission slip, this is it. And thank you. That's it.
Ben, awesome and very inspirational points, thoughts, and advice. And of course, we are all constantly, being affected by previous generations and all sorts of situations, right? Expectations, conditions. But regardless of what type of situation we may be going through, the zero mindset does sound like a great approach through which we can start with a clean slate and with nothing impacting our path, right? And to set up the mindset strategy, our perspective and direction, and of course, the business strategy, the speed for effectively and the path for effectively getting to where we want to go, right? And especially for entrepreneurs, this sounds like the approach to follow, starting from scratch and as they build the right infrastructure to embark on their journey, right? Would you say that especially for those who build a business, for everybody who gets inspired by something and want to do something, the zero mindset is the way to go and the way to approach things?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I did really take a look at this and I tried to apply it from all angles, which is why at the beginning I did say, for those getting out of college, for those just having an idea, or for those wanting to change careers. And I tried to look at this place from the number of conversations that I've had to just trying to put myself in a more empathetic place with people that might be facing similar struggles. So yes, I created this around more of a business mindset. Yes, I do believe that this is a better framework than saying, hey, here's business strategy, go all in. And the reason I say this is because I tried that before and that didn't work. Especially didn't work with the younger generation who don't care about your business strategy. They want to figure out what it is that is holding them back. And they have to really go through those trials and tribulations of figuring that out. And I really put a lot of energy for the mindset part of this because I felt like that was where the ingredients really lied for me on the issues that my generation and the younger generation face, is that there's a lack of direction with themselves, not necessarily a business strategy direction. It was more of a direction on why are these things holding me back? What am I fearful of? Why am I seeing these things as risk? Why have I been told to save my money? Like just a number of things that are a little bit less applicable to the lives. So yes, I would say that this is more of a rounder approach to all those things.
Ben, would you say that absolutely? Would you say that the zero mindset, it sounds like an approach that is valid regardless of generation that one belongs to and that has one's life, whether they are baby boomers, Generation Xers, millennials, Gen Zs? Would you say that it's a timeless approach that could be followed by people in different generations? And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry.
No, of course. And how do you feel that the people from different generations would be able, in quotes, and willing to go and follow the zero mindset approach as they do things?
Yeah, actually, funny you say that. I've actually spoken with a number of people who are, Generation X and baby boomers. My parents are also baby boomers, obviously. So I don't even know if there's anybody that could benefit more than if they feel that they could actually gain enough, like that they could actually feel like, all right, I'm willing to look this over and feel like there's some deprogramming that I can be thinking about here so that I could do what I feel like doing, or I could feel better about what I could be doing. So yes, 100%. Like there wasn't a time where I was creating this without that in mind. Even though obviously this conversation was kind of geared from my experiences talking with college students or those that have just graduated, no question have I gotten input from baby boomers and people in a variety of different generations on this concept, and even people I've sat down with in the past that have really encouraged me on this concept. So absolutely.
For sure. And look, Ben, thank you so much again for the very, very insightful and very inspirational presentation as part of Leading Entrepreneurs of the World. Congratulations on all of your success so far with everything you've been involved with. And we look forward to seeing everything else that you will create and build in the future. Of course, super, super excited to read The Zero Mindset. Thank you, and talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.